2 o'clock. I think we'll get started. Welcome, everybody. This is the British Interplanetary Society. I'm Bob Stanton, and today we've got a talk by Mark Hempsell, and we'll just come on to that in a second. Before I do, just want to share a few things. I've noticed that so about 60% of you are members, but means 40% of you aren't. So if you think about joining the British Interplanetary Society, look at what you get. It's absolutely awesome, and I can recommend it. I've never looked back since I joined. I think it was 17 years ago, something like that. And you can just suddenly binge watch and all sorts of videos and symposia and all sorts. Really good. If you have ideas for articles for any of our publications, Spaceflight Magazine, Space Chronicle, or your academic writing papers for the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society, they're always interested to see new sources of information. So please contact them. So today, Mark Hempsell. I think most of us already know who Mark Hempsell is because most of us are thoroughbred British Interplanetary Society people. He's ex-British Aerospace, he's former managing director of reaction engines, he's former academic at Bristol University, he's twice president of the BIS, and he's been working on, and we've seen many talks about the Scorpion project with his Hempsell astronautics. And so just on that subject, I mean, you can see a lot of Mark's videos actually on the British Interplanetary Society, but he also has his own YouTube channel, and I'm going to make sure that the link's in the chat in a moment if it's not there already, and I'm going to check these out myself later. But today he's going to be talking about Black Arrow. The title of the talk is Nuclear Arrow, and it's about the 1960s rocket we had, Black Arrow, and how it could have been seen as or have an effect on Cold War politics in the 1960s. So I'm going to stop sharing there and ask Mark to take over. Oh no, sorry, I've missed the obvious one. Sorry, Mark. I meant to call it. My other colleague at British, or one of my other colleagues at the West Midlands branch, Mark Perman, has resigned as branch chair. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to everything that Mark's done over the years. Mark actually recruited me into the branch something like 15 years ago. And he and John Harlow, mainly Mark, were the powerhouse of the branch for all these years. The fact that it's actually so active today is really all down to Mark. He's absolute. It's an absolute pleasure to work with, and as I said, he's done so much, and it's. But I know he's not completely disappearing, but he has stepped down as secretary at least for the time being, and I'm hoping we can lure him back at some point when things are more appropriate for him to do so. Mark, thank you. Officially, I'd like to say thank you very much from the branch for everything you've done. It's definitely much appreciated. Now, Mark Hempsell, I apologise for that. Over to you, my friend.
How are we doing? Can you see the... Yes, right, good. So we are looking today at Black Arrow and specifically how it would be perceived, or indeed how it might have been. The Black Arrow, of course, is the sort of the cuddly toy of British astronautics. It's our pride and joy as the only rocket we made that actually went to orbit. And Alan Bond and I were discussing Black Arrow in the pub, literally in the pub over a pie and pint. And as we got talking, we kept coming up with sort of weird aspects to Black Arrow. And by the end of the meal, Alan said, I think it was a missile. Well, we went away and we explored it. And you can see from the date of the first paper, we're talking about the mid-1990s now. And we both sort of beavered away, particularly on material that was available at the time. And that's the result of the paper that we gave at the IEC. And then sort of on the 50th anniversary of Black Arrow, we revised the paper up a bit and published it in JBIS. And also I wrote a sort of summary, more casual version of what we were thinking for Space Chronicle, again, as part of the celebration of Black Arrow's 50 years. So what we had at the end of our pub talk was a question. Was Black Arrow really a covert way of getting a backup to Polaris as a sort of silo-based alternative to Polaris? And that's where we started, and that's what we were exploring. But as we went through the sort of the process, we started having a second question, which is, what did everybody else think we were doing with the program? So we got interested in what are the foreign intelligence agencies making of this sort of somewhat strange, and I hope I'm going to convince you it is a little strange, British program. Okay, I probably don't need to do this, but just in case, a reminder of the characters we're going to be seeing in this story. There's Black Arrow, who of course is the hero. There's Black Knight, which is its sort of father come little brother, a bit of both, as we shall see. There, I'm going to call it the antagonist, but the counter is the Polaris missile, A3 variant. And of course, we've got the failed missile Blue Streak. And we mustn't forget there is a supporting cast of politicians and civil servants. And we are left wondering what the hell they were doing. So, Black Knight, let's start with there, because that's where the whole thing starts. Black Knight has just one purpose, which is to test missile re-entry warheads. It first flew in 1958 and was a support technical program to the Blue Streak missile program. We're going to see, and just have a quick look a little later, at two sort of special defined programs that happened in the 1960s called Gaslight and Dazzle, which were all re-entry warhead programs. And at least Gaslight does open a few sort of what's going on there questions. So that's the start point. As I said, it was supporting Blue Streak, and Blue Streak was the British nuclear deterrent vehicle that was being developed in the late 50s. It was parallel developed with the Russian R7 and the United States Atlas. And they both, well, all three have quite a lot in common. Again, to be strictly accurate, Blue Streak wasn't intercontinental, it was intermediate range. But given where Britain was placed to Russia, it's doing the same job. So they're all using lots of kerosene. And that means that as missiles, they're actually pretty rubbish because it takes too long to get them ready to fly. So none of them are suitable as missiles. Only the R7 ever gets deployed, and even then in very small and unconvincing numbers. All of them made good space launchers, or one might say ought to have made good space launchers. Certainly the R7, which became finally the Soyuz launch vehicle, is probably the most successful launch system in the history of astronautics so far. So anyway, all of them are abandoned as missile, and UK abandons Blue Streak in its missile role in 1960. And what have we got as a legacy? Sorry, we've jumped. Oh, sorry, no. Sorry, just lost my place there a bit. So, Britain, 1960, where is our nuclear deterrent? We've just cancelled Blue Streak. We still have the V-bombers. Now, the V-bombers are judged to be increasingly vulnerable to Soviet air defense, to the point that we don't think that they're going to be credible as a deterrent. It's a little difficult to get on top of this thinking because in the early 60s, twice the V-bombers went up against the United States in exercises designed to see how well the United States could defend itself. And twice the V-bombers got in and performed approach runs and dummy sort of bomb drops on United States cities. So if the United States can't stop the V bombers, I'm not quite sure why we thought the Soviets could. The best thinking I can come up with is that we really were thinking ahead, and realizing the way things were going meant that in the time it takes to develop new systems, the V bombers might not look so good. So on Blue Streak's cancellation, we do have a sort of a legacy. We've got the rocket itself, which is the basis for a launch system. Very importantly, and something we keep forgetting, is we just got the infrastructure. We've got the government and the industry complex needed to make these sort of things happen. Our rocket technology is world class. It's as good as the United States, and arguably better than the Russians. We also, independent of the rocketry, we have the ability to independently make nuclear warheads. And putting them into re-entry bodies, again, we're world leading. The Black Knight is so good that the United States is using it in the 1960s to do their re-entry body testing. And also, because the Blue Streak was silo-based, we'd done an awful lot of work on silos, to the extent of scale model silos at Westcott, which gave us information and technologies and understanding that we could then send to the United States and teach the United States how to do their missile silos. So we have an awful lot of legacy from the Blue Streak period that makes it, we might not have the finances to back it up, but technically we can do everything needed to make nuclear deterrence, at least from silo-based missiles, in our back pocket, so to speak. But that's not how we solve the problem. How we solve the problem is we go to America, and this is the Eisenhower administration, and we say, could we have Skybolt, please? We rather like the look of that. And if you look at it from the 1960 perspective, it is the perfect vehicle. It's a standoff missile, which can be launched from our V bombers. So our V bomber fleet keeps being useful and keeps its role as the nuclear deterrent. It's got a Mach 12 capability, so you ain't going to be stopping it. It's got a 2,000-kilometer range, so our bombers can stay well clear of the worst of any Soviet air defenses. For Britain, this looks like the perfect technical solution to beef up our nuclear deterrent for many, many years to come. And in 1960, we signed an agreement joining in this program with the intention of deploying it. And then, 1962, America cancels the program. Oops, difficulties, real difficulties, because the United States informs the UK just a month before the cancellation happened, and they did it in a public manner. They didn't sort of sidle up through sort of secret channels and say, look, heads up, guys, we're about to cancel this program. It was said in a manner that meant questions were being asked in the House of Commons, and Mr. Macmillan was a very embarrassed bunny. As a consequence, there's a sort of emergency summit meeting between Kennedy and Macmillan that was held in Nassau. And during that meeting, they agreed that the UK would get Polaris instead of Skybolt, that it would have British warheads, and as a sort of side quid pro quo, United States would get a submarine base right next to our third most populous city, which was not necessarily a good move politically. The question is, and I'm going to go through this in a bit more detail, but the question I would ask you to bear in mind is, why the hell did Kennedy do this? Now, I've seen footage of Macmillan coming back at the airport from this summit with a great smirk on his face. And they said, you know, why did Kennedy agree? Because I think everybody was wondering why the hell Kennedy agreed to this. And he just said, well, you know, I was able to persuade him of the importance and, you know, and, you know, basically saying I applied the levers of my supreme political skill, and let's face it, Macmillan was not a modest man, got us the deal. It's normally assumed that the threat he made was that, hey, look, you've put me in an embarrassing position. Hugh Gateskill, who is head of the Labour Party, is making hay here. The next general election, he might win, and he's a socialist. And of course, we know if we say socialist to an American, they think communist, and scares the wits out of them.